Welcome back to the laboratory, dear friends. Tonight, a story about the things we leave behind and how patiently they wait. It is a Wednesday morning, the 1st of August 2012 on Wall Street. At 9:30, the bell rings, the American stock market opens, and 212 perfectly ordinary customer orders arrive at a company called Knight Capital. Small orders, retail orders, the kind that arrive by the thousand every day of the week. Knight's machinery accepts them, considers them, and then begins to buy, and sell, and buy, and it does not stop. In the next 45 minutes, those 212 small orders will become more than 4 million trades, and the company will lose, on average, $10 million a minute. I am the magnanimous Dr. Warthen, and this is the Broken Machine Society. Case file number 9, the code that would not die. If you enjoy watching money evaporate at industrial scale, do tap that like button. The Society accepts no advertising, as you shall shortly be reminded. Now, let us admire the patient, because Knight Capital was no minnow. Roughly 1 share in every 10 traded in America passed through that firm, and at the heart of it sat a machine called SMARS, an order router, a tireless clerk whose entire job was to take a large instruction and chop it into small ones. You say, "Buy me 100,000 shares." SMARS says, "Very good," and dispatches 1,000 little orders to a dozen markets, watching the total climb, stopping precisely when the job is done. That last part, dear friends, the stopping precisely when the job is done, I want you to hold on to. It is going to matter enormously. Now, our tale properly begins 9 years earlier, in 2003, with a piece of software called PowerPeg. Its purpose does not matter tonight. What matters is that in 2003, Knight stopped using it. They did not delete it. Why would they? It was harmless. It sat there on the machines, unused and unloved, the way a box sits in an attic. And in 2005, 2 years later, an engineer improved something. He took the counting function, the part that tallied how many shares had been bought so far, and said, "That's enough, stop now." And he moved it to a better place, earlier in the process. A sensible change, an improvement even. But the old PowerPeg code had relied on that counter, and now the counter had moved out from under it, which meant that from that day forward, if anything ever woke PowerPeg up, it would run forever, buying and selling without limit, because the part of it that knew how to stop was no longer there. Nobody tested it. Why would they? It was not in use. So the machine sat in the attic for 7 years, patient as a landmine, and nobody in the building knew it had gone bad. Speaking of expensive things that produce nothing, I am told it is time for a brief word from tonight's sponsor. I have no sponsor. I shall grow my own, somehow. Now, where were we? Yes, the last week of July 2012. The New York Stock Exchange is launching a new program, and Knight has written new software to take part. The rollout is careful and unhurried. It begins on the 27th of July, and the code is copied to the SMARS servers over several days. There are 8 of them. A technician copies the new code to 7, not to the 8th, just not. No alarm sounds because nothing was watching. No second-person checks because there was no rule that anyone should. And the new software, in order to switch itself on, reused an old, disused switch, a switch that on 7 servers now meant run the new program, and on the 8th server still meant, exactly as it had since 2003, wake up PowerPeg. And then everyone went home for the weekend. The trap sat armed for 5 days. On the morning of the 1st of August, at 1 minute past 8, the machines began sending emails. 97 of them over the next 90 minutes to a group of people at night, and they contained a phrase that should have stopped the world. PowerPeg disabled. Here is the tragedy of those 97 messages. They were not alarms. Nobody had ever designed them to be alarms. They were routine, automated notices of a kind that arrived constantly and that nobody was assigned to read. The warning was delivered, on time, in writing, 90 minutes before the disaster, to an inbox. At 9:30, the bell rang. 7 servers did exactly as they were told. The 8th woke the dead, and SMARS began to work with terrible enthusiasm. An order would arrive. The 8th server would send out child orders to fill it, and because the part that counted had been moved away in 2005, it never learned that the order was already filled. So it sent more and more, buying high and selling low, over and over, thousands of times a second, in 154 different stocks. And on the trading floors of America, prices began to move because a tenth of the market had started shouting nonsense. Inside Knight, they could see something enormous accumulating. They could not see where it came from. And here, dear friends, is the detail that elevates this from an accident to a tragedy, and it is the detail almost every telling omits. In their hunt for the problem, the engineers found the difference between the servers, and they removed the new software from the 7 that had it. They took away the correct code and left the old switch behind. And so, the same old switch that had woken the dead on one machine now woke it on all 8. In their attempt to stop the bleeding, they widened the wound. It ran for about 45 minutes, 4 million trades, 397 million shares. And in the end, it was not stopped by a lever or a button or a great red switch on a wall, because there was no such thing anywhere in the building. Nobody had built one. Nobody had written down what a person should do if the machine went mad. The bill came to something over $440 million, more than the firm had. By the close of the next day, the shares had lost 3/4 of their value. Within a week, a consortium of rivals rode in with $400 million and took, in exchange, roughly 3/4 of the company. Knight did not go bankrupt in 45 minutes, whatever the internet will tell you. Something quieter happened. It survived, diminished, and was absorbed within the year. And when the regulators finally arrived, they fined the firm $12 million, not for losing the money, which was Knight's own money to lose, but for the controls it did not have. Their verdict contained a sentence of magnificent, devastating simplicity. A written procedure requiring a simple double check of the deployment could have averted the events of August the 1st. And here is tonight's lesson, so listen closely. A machine remembers everything you have ever taught it, including the things you told it to forget. That old code was not dangerous in 2003 when they stopped using it. It became dangerous in 2005 when somebody improved something else, and nobody thought to ask what else might be leaning on the part they moved. Deletion, dear friends, is a decision. It requires somebody to be brave enough to throw a thing away. And if you cannot bring yourself to do that, then at the very least, build yourself a way to say stop. Because a machine that can act faster than you can think is only safe if somebody, somewhere, can reach the plug. And so the society closes the folder on the code that would not die. Case closed. Next time, before the society, a telescope, launched in 1990 to see to the very edge of creation, which sent back photographs that were blurred. Its great mirror had been ground to the wrong shape with exquisite precision, because the instrument used to test it had been assembled with a flake of paint knocked loose. 2 other instruments said the mirror was wrong. They were disregarded for being the cheap ones. Stay curious, delete your dead code, and build yourself a plug. The society is adjourned.